All right, let's get right into it. Large language models are, well, amazing, but they've got this one huge fundamental problem. Their knowledge is basically frozen in time. Once they're trained, that's it. They don't learn anything new. And in a world that changes by the second, that's a pretty big deal.
So that's the real million-dollar question, isn't it? If your business is depending on an AI, you just can't have it spitting out answers based on data from last year or even last week. So how do we fix this? How do we plug these incredibly powerful brains into the here and now?
Well, it turns out there are two leading solutions on the table, and they come at this problem from completely different angles. On one side, you have Retrieval-Augmented Generation, or RAG. Think of this as the live researcher. On the other side, you've got Cache-Augmented Generation, or CAG, which is more like the prepared expert who's already done all the homework. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll dive deep into RAG, the researcher. Then we'll look at CAG, the expert. After that, we'll put them in the ring for head-to-head comparison to really see the trade-offs. Then we'll check out some real-world examples, and finally, take a little peek into what the future might hold.
Okay, first up is RAG. The whole idea here is to tackle the knowledge problem by giving the language model a direct line to the outside world, letting it tap into information that's constantly changing.
So what is RAG, really? At its core, it's a technique that lets an AI go out and fetch information from external sources the very moment you ask it a question. So instead of just relying on what it was trained on, it actively finds the most relevant, up-to-the-minute info to build its answer. And here's how that little dance works. When you ask a question, the first thing RAG does is search an external knowledge base. This is usually a fancy thing called a vector database, which is basically a super smart library that organizes information by meaning, not just keywords. It pulls the most relevant documents and then, and this is the key part, it hands all that fresh context to the language model to create an answer that's actually grounded in current facts. I love this analogy because it's just perfect. RAG doesn't expect the AI to have memorized the entire internet. No way! Instead, it gives it a library card and teaches it how to find the right book on the right shelf at exactly the right time. All right, now let's pivot to our second approach. This one builds a totally different kind of expert. CAG, or Cache-Augmented Generation, is not about searching a library. It's about showing up to the test with the perfect cheat sheet already in your pocket. So instead of fetching information on the fly, CAG is all about raw efficiency. The game here is to preload all the important documents right into the model's working memory, its context window. That information is then just there, sitting in a cache, ready to be used again and again for similar questions. Now, this is where it gets really clever, especially for boosting performance. First, you preload your key info, but second, it uses something called key value caching. The best way to think about this is like doing a math problem. You jot down your intermediate calculations on some scrap paper, right? Well, KV caching is the AI doing the same thing. If the next question is similar, it doesn't have to start from scratch. It just reuses the notes on its scrap paper. It's incredibly fast because it remembers how it thought about the problem before. And that brings us to the perfect contrast. If RAG is the AI with a library card, CAG is the AI that studied all night and came in with a detailed cheat sheet. It doesn't need to look anything up because the answers are already right there, ready to go. Okay, so we've met our two contenders, the live researcher and the prepared expert. Now it's time to put them side by side and really dig into the critical trade-offs you have to weigh when you're choosing between them. This table lays it all out pretty clearly. But let's focus on the two big ones, speed and knowledge. RAG is going to be slower, but it gives you that real-time, super fresh data. CAG is absolutely lightning fast, but its information is only as good as its last update, which means it can get stale. And then you've got scalability. RAG can grow as big as your database, while CAG is ultimately limited by the model's available RAM. Let's really drill down on that speed trade-off because it's a huge factor. RAG's biggest weakness is latency. That whole process of searching, retrieving, and then processing adds precious milliseconds, or even seconds, to every single query. CAG, on the other hand, just skips all of that. The info's already in memory, access is practically instant. For raw speed, it's the undisputed champion. But, and you knew there was a but coming, that incredible speed comes at a price, and that price is freshness. RAG can give you an answer based on something that was published 5 seconds ago. It's perfect for things that change fast. CAG's knowledge, though, is just a snapshot. If the facts change after the cache is loaded, the AI will keep giving you the old, wrong answer until you manually refresh it.
And you can imagine the risk there, a bot quoting an old price or a financial tool missing a critical market shift.
So it all comes down to using the right tool for the right job. Enough with the theory, let's see how this actually plays out in the real world.
Okay, take the legal fields. If you're a lawyer researching the absolute latest court rulings, you need RAG. There's just no question. The data is constantly in flux. But if you're just checking against your company's internal compliance rules, which almost never change, CAG is perfect. It can answer this same policy question thousands of times a day at maximum speed.
You see this same pattern in finance. For analyzing live market data, you absolutely need RAG. You can't base a multi-million-dollar trade on yesterday's numbers. But for routine questions like, what are the terms of this standard loan product? CARG can deliver that instant, consistent answer every single time without the lag.
And in healthcare, the stakes are obviously even higher. A doctor consulting an AI needs RAG to access the very latest medical research. But for quickly pulling up a patient's stable medical history or reviewing a standard procedure, the speed and reliability of CHAG is a massive advantage. So it's pretty clear this isn't always an either-or decision. In fact, where this is all headed is probably a smart, sophisticated mix of both. A hybrid model that really does give you the best of both worlds.
You can imagine a system that uses CAG for all the common, predictable questions to stay super fast, but then has a trigger to switch over to a RAG pipeline for any unusual or time-sensitive queries. The upside is obvious. You're optimized for both speed and accuracy. The catch? Well, building and managing a system like that gets a whole lot more complex.
So, if you walk away with just one thing, let it be this. There is no single best answer. The right choice, RAG, CAG, or a hybrid of the two, boils down to answering two simple questions about your specific needs. How often does your data change, and how fast do you need your answers?
And that kind of leaves us with a final big thought to chew on. As these AI systems get woven deeper and deeper into our lives, what's ultimately going to be more important for their evolution? Is it a bigger, more infinite library to search? Or is it a faster, more perfect memory? The answer to that is probably going to define the next generation of AI.